Welcome to another episode of Electable, sponsored by Indiana Women's Action Movement. I'm Deb Chubb, and I'm going to try to refrain from being a total fangirl, but I'm here with the illustrious Sheila Kennedy, who has a long, wonderful career in politics and writing and teaching and lawyering. And so Sheila, welcome. And I hope you can give us a little bit of background. You've done so many things and I don't even know what's best to mention about you, but so give us a little background about your career.
Okay, well, what you called my career, my mother called my itinerary. I've had about 5 careers. I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. I began professional life as a high school English teacher and went to law school, joined a law firm. I was the first woman hired at what was then Baker and Daniels here in Indianapolis at a time when women weren't noticeably present in the profession, and ran for Congress as a Republican because we at the time had 2 sane political parties. We no longer do that. And so in 2000, I came out as a Democrat, and one of my friends thought maybe I was coming out as a lesbian, but I wasn't. But my kids thought that was pretty funny. But at any rate, I had a stint as a real estate developer, and went to 6 years. I spent 6 years at the Indiana ACLU as the executive director. I still remember Nuvo's headline, ICLU, which was at that time, we called it the Indiana Civil Liberties Union, taken over by card-carrying Republican. It was terrifying, anyway. And then after 6 years there, I joined the faculty at the School of Public and Environmental Affairs at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis, and spent the last 22 years teaching law and public policy, media and public policy, and a variety of other courses that they were very good to me at IUPUI. They let me make shit up. And so I taught a course in sex and public policy, which a lot of people enrolled before they realized it was really gender. And it wasn't nearly as exciting as they may have thought. So, and now as of the end of December, I'm retired and have no idea what I'm going to do with myself.
Well, and you've also written many awesome books about politics and do a daily blog about politics, and which is really wonderful. I enjoyed, and I know you have a large following just reading your blog.
It's wonderful that people read it. It is really my way of venting. I would probably explode if I couldn't have the blog and say, for Christ, what's going on? What's wrong with you people? But at any rate, I've written 10 books, and who knows, there might be another one in me, but I don't think so. I'm not sure. So that's all of it. Well, it's all of it, except my husband and I have 5 kids between us, and they're really the best thing going. The really best thing going is grandchildren, but I won't take time to tell you all about that.
Yeah, I've heard they're much better than children.
Oh yeah, my husband says grandkids are your reward for not killing your children. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, so today though, what we're going to talk about is misinformation in politics, in the media, which is really a specialty of yours. And we all know historically that misinformation in politics has been around forever, since the very first campaigns. And we also know, legally speaking, that defamation of public figures is not the same as defamation of your neighbor. So that is to say, you can say things that are defamatory, unkind about public officials with much less scrutiny as to the damage that you might cause compared to someone who's, private person. And so that, I think, supports in some ways the historical kind of misinformation that's gone on in politics, just, attack ads, etc. I know I worked with these 29 outstanding women candidates last year, and towards the end of the campaign, the postcards went out with the big X across her face saying, baby killer, so, and you can get away with that in politics. But now things have changed, haven't they? We're in a whole new realm of misinformation. So tell us first your take on it as in terms of how it's changed over just the last several years.
Well, I actually think that we've got two separate issues going on here, and there's a confluence that's very unfortunate. You've got, as you point out, the usual amount of misinformation. Thomas Jefferson will burn your Bibles. Did you know that? And we have a lot of concern. I have a lot of concern about the fact that those kinds of defamatory statements, or at least unreal, unfair statements, lies, we call them, get much more currency thanks to the internet and social media and all of that. So we've got that going on. The ability to disseminate misinformation at a much higher level, and the ability to disseminate incorrect information too. So it's a balancing act, but at the same time, I hate to sound like I'm overreacting here, but at the same time, we have a growing percentage of Americans who, if you will excuse my expression, are batshit crazy. I mean, there was a recent poll or survey, an accurate academic, because you can poll anything, but that found that 14% of Americans believe that the United States is being controlled by Satan-worshiping pedophiles. They also believe that Trump won the election. I'd love to have a discussion and say, okay, you had a ballot here. Trump was at the top and Senator A was at the bottom. Senator A won and Trump lost. How was that manipulated? I mean, these are not rational kinds of things. This whole QAnon business, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has, let's see, the California fires were started by Jewish space lasers. I missed them, and I'm Jewish too. I just and wearing a mask, of course, is tantamount to the Holocaust. It is so beyond what any of us would have thought even 5 years ago would gain any purchase. And the reason it has gained purchase, and there's a whole compendium of reasons, but as the two parties have polarized, and as an aside, let me tell you that when I was much, much younger, maybe your age, I remember thinking, why can't the parties be more distinguishable philosophically? Why don't well, they are now, and be careful what you wish for, I think so far from being big tents, we have as traditional religion has sort of ebbed, which is not, in my view, a bad thing, because a lot of craziness ebbed with it. But people who need that security of a worldview that explains everything to them have moved to the edges of the political structure. And so you've got crazy right-wingers, and we've got some crazy left-wingers. The difference right now, I think, is that the Republican Party really resembles a cult today. And I say that as someone who was for 35 years an active Republican. You know, I was corporation counsel in a Republican administration here in Indianapolis. I ran for Congress as a Republican in 1980. And by the way, I was pro-choice and pro-gay rights. And I won a Republican primary, which gives you an idea of how far that party has moved into the whatever it is they've moved into. But you've got the Republicans who are pretty monolithic. And I hate to be nasty about this, but I think it's accurate. They've become the party of white nationalism. The Democrats have had to be more understanding of nuance and complexity simply because Democrats still are a really broad tent. And while Democrats have their own crazies, they've also got a lot of other constituencies that have to be dealt with. So most Democrats are still like living in the real world, while the Republicans are worried about space lasers and the big lie and whatever.
We know this is happening for some specific reasons, and that is, of course, the internet, which creates these echo chambers. So as you click on a news source that is, kind of a right-wing news source, you will receive more of that sort of information. The algorithms keep feeding you your preferred bias. And so we know that's right. Yeah, so we know that's one of the big reasons. And we know too that one of the big reasons is because, the former president of the United States could stand up and just tell bald-faced lies as if you were, reciting the weather. It was unbelievable that to listen to just lies coming, he knows he's lying. He knows he's lying. And he's still lying.
I'm not sure I agree with that.
Go ahead.
I'm not sure that Donald Trump knows the difference between a truth and a lie. I mean, I think he is such a mentally deranged person that I think at any given time he believes what he's saying, which is even scarier if you start to think about it. Yeah. But as I read in something recently, Trump didn't introduce all this. Trump was the result of a lengthier period of time when we were spiraling out of control. Many of the things that have led up to this time have all come together in sort of a stew. I mean, there are books written. I've written about it. I mean, there are a number of reasons why so many of our fellow Americans are terrified. They are characterized by grievance, mostly racial. You can trace this, but the problem is today, unlike times past, the people who have these grievances and who wish to believe in, Satan worshiping pedophiles in the White House or something, can go online and occupy these little bubbles of misinformation. And thanks to the algorithms that you've referenced, and thanks to these boards that the crazy right wing has established, they can live in an environment that only supports what most of us from a distance would say is insanity.
Yeah, it is hard to believe that, even as you say, there's the echo chambers and bubbles. And it's hard to believe, when you say like these crazy things. I mean, you're not making this up. I mean, this really is the stuff. The satanistic pedophiles, that dominate the Democratic Party. It's hard to believe that people would believe that under any circumstance.
But remember the guy who went to the pizza parlor in DC to save those children in the basement that turned out they're not to be a basement in that particular pizza parlor, and he was going to save. I mean, he clearly believed it.
Right.
Now, is he delusional? Yeah, but where did that delusion come from, and how was it supported? I think one of the biggest problems we have, and as I said earlier to you, I got lots of problems, I got no solutions, but Fox News, and it's pretenders. You have a national network that is feeding a certain worldview and ignoring fact. And my husband and I were on a cruise 5 or 6 years ago, and we were in the lounge, and this couple is saying, oh, well, the only people we trust are the ones on Fox News. And I'm going, but I don't know how you break through that kind of devotion to a source that is telling you things you want to believe. It's
right. You've hit right on it. That is the penultimate question. How do you break that love affair, that unbreakable loyalty? I don't know how it began, and how it was established, so strongly. But we have got to find a way to find some reality that we can all agree on. You mentioned earlier about the newspapers, when we used to look at newspapers, we all opened up the same newspaper and we all looked at the same facts. And now we don't look at the same facts. And how can we, and you used a great example, like a baseball game. So, I mean, are we at a point now where I can say the Cubbies lost yesterday and someone else will say, no, they won?
It's, if you no longer are arguing about the same fact, well, you're a lawyer, when we go to court and two sides stipulate this is what happened, we can still argue about, excuse me, the consequences or the meaning. Okay, we all know those two cars collided, but I think it was his fault and she, those kinds of, we went to war in Iraq. Those are the facts, and then we can draw different conclusions from those facts. We can use those facts to buttress really very different positions. But when you don't even start with the facts, when you say we were at war in Iraq and you say, oh no, we weren't, there's nowhere to go.
And you lead to a really great point, a thing that's happening now with the, in education. I sit on a school board. And so I, pay attention to a lot of this. And I'm sure that in Hamilton County, and in many other places, and it turns out in many other states, there is a movement to squelch any discussion of America's history with slavery and the impact of those 400 years on the lives of African Americans today. When it happened here in Indiana, I, of course, poked around to see who was leading this movement and found that it was an out-of-state organization that was developing this movement here. And it all makes sense because now it's the exact same movement happening in many other states and in many other places in Indiana. I'm of course proud to say that in Hamilton County at Clay High School, it didn't work. Parents showed up and said, no, we're not doing that. We're not playing politics with history. But as you say, there's now this movement to really, really create different facts.
Yes. And that part, I mean, when we talk about education, that's not new. I don't know about you, but the first time I ever heard of the Tulsa race riots or that massacre was 2 years ago. And I took a lot of history courses. If there was ever a mention, let alone a discussion of the Trail of Tears, I never heard it. Maybe I was absent that day. Yeah. I mean, our teaching of history has not been honest. Well, look at, former governor, now president of a university, Mitch Daniels, who went on a rampage against a book by Howard Zinn, which uncovered some of those unfortunate parts of our history. What's the old saying? If you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. I think right now we're at a time in society where there is we're finally coming to terms with racism, I think. Whether coming to terms will get us anywhere, we'll see. But we've got a lot of unexplored territory in our history, and a lot of rejected history. And there are, unfortunately, a lot of Americans who are absolutely adamantly opposed to confronting it. And it does get back to misinformation and what they like to call confirmation bias. Well, America is the greatest country in the world, and I'm going to have a curriculum that confirms that for my kids. I was writing a blog the other day, and I remembered there's a book that I really recommend. It's older now, although she's updated it. It's called The Way We Never Were: American Families and the Nostalgia Trap. And you see this with the Southern lost cause. They're nostalgic for a history that never existed. And, when you are distorting reality, it makes you unable to deal with the future. It's really, we are at an inflection point in this country, and it scares me because, first of all, the number of people who are, as I not very nicely put it, batshit crazy, and a number of others who are not altogether sure, is a really concerning number. And when you can take these, we can laugh at some of these things. I mean, I noticed that Marjorie Taylor Greene today demanded that Biden give her an answer to a question about the virus by June 31st. And as we know, and she clearly doesn't, June only has 30 days. I mean, there are some things that you really, you can't say are a matter of opinion. But it is different. I have no idea how you talk to someone who thinks the country is being controlled by satanic pedophiles. I mean, it's like walking into an asylum. But clearly, we have to do something. And the only thing I know to do is work our fannies off to make sure that more people like that don't get into public office. Because I don't know how you reach them otherwise.
Right. I mean, and that's the conclusion I came to too, and that is that we just need to elect better representatives. Part of
how about just sane ones?
Just sane would be great. Right. So and part of the representation we have, particularly in Indiana, I mean, at the State House, is just it's just so it's unbelievable. It's just unbelievable, the stuff that comes out and the stuff that these legislators, believe. And, I've done lobbying for a long time. I'm sure you have too. And when you go down there and try to talk about a kind of a complex issue, and legislators just look at you and they have no idea what you're talking about. And it's shocking. It is just shocking.
Or if you're a woman, isn't that cute? I mean, maybe now that's a little different, but when I first went into the law and I would go to court or I would go to the legislature for something, it was sort of this patronizing, oh, isn't that cute? She's a lawyer. Wow. I will restrain myself from saying what comes to mind. But part of that, and this gets back to something that I think very few people want to confront, it's systemic. The reason we have all those crazy legislators, and we do, is because we are so dramatically gerrymandered. And the gerrymandering in Indiana is all to privilege rural areas of the state and disadvantage urban areas. And until we can get rid of that, and thanks to Senator Manchin, that doesn't look imminent. We're going to continue to get people in the legislature who represent some of the least well-educated, sparsely populated, and backward parts of the state, which also need representation, don't get me wrong, but so do urban areas. And the gerrymandering, I suddenly realized at a meeting not long ago, Julia Vaughn was talking for Common Cause, and I realized that the way in which our legislature has been gerrymandered takes pieces of urban areas like Indianapolis and marries them to larger rural areas so that the people that we elect, very few of them, I think we've got 2 state reps who represent only urban parts of Indianapolis. And those legislators are responsive to people who think nothing of, disregarding and dismissing urban concerns. It's frustrating, and it is systemic. Until we can do something about the way in which these systems work, we're going to continue to elect people who at best don't give a shit and at worst are crazy.
Yeah, I think, and I'll try to put it in the bucket of uneducated, if I can, if that, just to give myself a little bit of hope. But I will tell you, I've spoken to state legislators who have insisted that they are strict constitutionalists, and in the very same breath, declare that our country was founded on Christian principles, and that we are a Christian government, and just in the very same breath, and you don't even have a moment to say, wait. So and he's not an attorney. He doesn't, but somebody has, given him this misinformation that's out there. And I think that's a very dangerous set of misinformation. And in fact, I think you just had a blog on that issue about separation of church and state, which I thought was just lovely. Very, very nice. So really, really reciting the rights of people who are religious, of any sort, or not religious, to have the same access to civic conversation as everybody else, and the same rights in government as everybody else.
One of the things about America that we ought to be teaching more in history class that really did make a huge difference was we were the first legal system to base rights on individual behavior rather than who you were. In Europe at the time, if you were a member of the aristocracy, you got more rights than, in the United States, your rights are supposed to be based upon your conduct, not your identity, not your sexual orientation, not your religion, and that was an incredible breakthrough. And that's the kind of thing that we ought to be celebrating and ought to be able to point to and say, okay, we haven't really lived up to this, but it's a great principle. Anyway.
It is a great principle, and we just need to keep saying it. I think we need to keep getting it out there. So, okay, so let's see if we can think about some sorts of solutions toward addressing the misinformation in the media. What do you got?
Well, I got lots of questions. No, I think that there are a lot of people working on this. I'm sure that you're aware there are a couple of national organizations that are putting out ways to understand, to create media literacy. And there's a media literacy chart that shows the biases of various national publications, that sort of thing. We desperately need to reinvigorate local journalism, and I don't know how. the internet broke the business plans of local newspapers. And right now, there's a huge scramble to figure out how to reinvigorate local journalism. But with respect to the dissemination of really harmful misinformation, I've noticed, for example, one of the local TV stations now offers to verify. If you're getting something online on social media and you're not sure whether it's true, send it to us and we'll look into it and we'll show you our sources and that sort of thing. That's helpful for two reasons. One, because it does sort of raise the issue of, everything you hear, it may not always be true. So even if they don't send you something to verify, you think, oh, maybe that. And then, of course, we've got all of those, we've got Snopes and Fact Check. And I think there will be more sites like that. At one time, I thought maybe what we need, because as you know, thanks to the First Amendment, government can't do this. But maybe what we need is like a good housekeeping seal of approval. Maybe organizations like there are statewide organizations and national ones for journalists. Maybe you come together and you put together a seal that you give to media sources that are not that this is true and that's not true, because there will always be mistakes and there will always be points of view. But okay, is this particular media source one that is adhering to ethical standards? Are they requiring confirmation before they go public with something? Is the way in which they approach the assessment of information professionally competent, and those sorts of things? And you say, yes, by and large, this is a media source that is going about it in the right way. Now, does that mean that this particular story is true? No. But at least as those of us who are scrolling down our Facebook feeds, if you see a story and it's got the little seal of approval, maybe, the problem with that, and the reason that I gave up is because you have to care. The person who's looking at that has to say, I'm concerned about getting misinformation and I want to check it out. I know our daughter will frequently, she's got a lot more energy, I think, these days than I do. She will frequently respond to something she's seen on Facebook by saying, here's what Snopes says about that, and then, of course, half the time you get a response from the original poster that says, oh, well, they're just liberals. I mean, evidently reality is a liberal construct. I don't know, but
well, let's try this application. So we have consumer protection laws, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it protects people, who consume items, who buy items from being scammed. So there are laws that say that if you're going to advertise a product, then you can't lie. It has to be, if you're going to make a claim about it, it has to be true, and you have to be able to back it up. So what if we applied that sort of, kind of commercial standard to other speech, to political speech?
You have to understand, I'm a free speech freak, but I think there's a real problem. First of all, even in the commercial arena, there's a lot of room for what the courts call puffery.
Right.
My mousetrap is the best mousetrap. Is that a lie? Well, probably it's not true, but is that actionable? No. I always had students who say, why can't we make lying not, a crime? Yeah. Well, first it goes back to my observation of Trump. Does he even know he's lying? If I passionately say that color is red and everybody else sees green, is that a lie? Or, so it's it's not even a slippery slope. It's a grease.
Right.
Anyway,
It
but
is. Well, and of course, there's the damages issues.
oh,
How do you
yeah.
establish damages?
Yeah. However, we do have defamation laws. And I was really very pleased to notice that Dominion, the company that manufactures the voting machines that were so defamed by the pillow folks and whatever, that they're suing for defamation. That's probably, I don't think there's going to be an answer. I guess is mine. I think there's going to be a lot of little answers. You're going to have well-meaning people who who care, like the TV station that's going to, verify. You've got the sites like Fact Check, and you're going to have some people who say, "Hey, you say that about me, and you're not able to prove it. I'm taking you to court." I mean, I think what we need is to reinstitute, if we ever had it, a culture that says, hey, this far and no farther. It's one thing to say that candidate is pro-choice and therefore I think she's a baby killer. Okay, I think that's, well, you know what I think. But that kind of discourse, while it's not ideal for a civil society, is pretty transparent. You're calling me that because you disagree with me. Okay, I understand that. It's the more subtle kinds. I mean, most of us also know there are not space lasers, but the use of disinformation. There's a caravan coming from Middle America, from South America, and they're going to rape all your children or whatever. And those kinds of things are pernicious. Yeah. And that is the nature of the disinformation that we have to be able to control and rebut. And I think it's going to take a whole raft of mechanisms and the creation of a culture that says, before you make this assertion, show me your evidence. We are not a country right now that thinks very highly of evidence. I mean, one of my biggest concerns is that public policy, which I taught for 22 years, just is not being made on the basis of evidence. The argument about minimum wage is a great example. It sounds perfectly reasonable to say, well, if you raise the minimum wage, people will have less money to hire people, and so it'll depress jobs. Well, it turns out that that's only true if everything else stays the same. But everything else doesn't stay the same, and so now we have some evidence. There's a feedback loop, I think.
I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah, I don't know. But we now have evidence that doesn't happen. So have we changed our mind about it? It's ideology trumps, no pun intended, trumps evidence. And that's a particularly pernicious form of misinformation.
Right. And I do want to add, I think here's another development that I think is important. And that is that at least I think Facebook, one of the platforms, has said we're no longer going to give more leeway to public figures in the kind of, speech that they put out there. And they're going to hold them to the same standards as regular people. So you can't put out the stuff that, sounds violent or hateful or untrue, and spreads malicious lies. So I think that's an important development. And let's hope that continues and moves forward.
Yes.
All right. I think we are running out of time, and it's a stormy day, so I'm not sure. I'm wondering if our internet is going to fail us. So I will have to wrap up. But I just thank you so much for doing this. Wonderful chatting with you. I hope we get to do it again. But before we go, I always like to ask, words of wisdom that you can leave with us. You have been around for a long time, know so much, and you've got so much to offer. So please give us some great words of wisdom before we go.
Oh, if I had wisdom, I just, I don't know, don't beat your children. No, just, I think participate, participate. If all Americans participated in the democratic process, I still believe that most Americans are sane and most Americans are thoughtful. And if you get out the vote, those people will prevail. So it is incredibly important to participate. I just was reading about, oh boy, now I'm blanking, Hannah Arendt, who wrote a very profound book on totalitarianism. And she felt strongly that if all members of the polity participate, you could avert the coming of totalitarianism. Who knows?
It's possible. I like to remind people that Joe Biden lost the state of Indiana by 400 and some thousand votes, and 1.6 million people who were registered did not vote. So less than a third of the people who didn't vote was the difference between Joe Biden winning the state of Indiana. So, all right. So anyway, thank you so much. You're so awesome. And I hope that you will consider doing this again so we can carry on this conversation.
I'll have just as many answers, which is
all right. Thank you so much. Until next time. Take care.